This is the recorded version of the lesson for November the 30th, 2020. Our learning standard, new today, welcome back from Thanksgiving, is 6E2.2. Conclude that the good health of humans requires monitoring the lithosphere, maintaining soil quality, and stewardship. So let's start off with this standard and break it down. So conclude means knowing all we know about soil and how important it is to plants and then ultimately to humans, how we've got to look after the land. We've got to make sure that the soil is still there, not eroded, and it's also in good quality. And then stewardship, just like the steward or stewardess on a plane or on a boat, we have to look after it. Today in class, we have some notes on soil conservation. We have an activity called Farmland Fantastic, an EdPuzzle on what happened when we didn't take care of the soil, called Dust Bowl, and a Flocab on George Washington Carver. This week's Achieve 3000 ties in as we start to talk about plants. Water these plants? Maybe not. And then the test for this standard is going to be on Wednesday. Let's head on over to Canvas. So we've done some redesigning on the Canvas page. And so one of the things that I'll hope will streamline everything is that all the standards have their own buttons. So here's that link to get to Achieve 3000s for Term 2. Here is the one for this new standard we're starting today. And what happens, of course, is it goes over to the modules page. You do have to wait a moment, and then it will jump down to the right spot. And sometimes you're like, am I going to wait? But waiting does pay off because you don't have to scroll as much. And here we are, it's jumped down to soil conservation. Here are the items for November the 30th. We have our notes on soil conservation, Farmland Fantastic, the EdPuzzle, and then the Flocab. Let's start over here with the notes. It says use the presentation to answer the questions that follow. This will also be helpful with other assignments in the unit. So the Farmland Fantastic today, and then the assignment we have tomorrow these notes will be very useful, so make sure you keep them handy for that. Here are the questions. Name one way that humans contribute to the loss of soil. Describe it in at least 2 sentences. And then pick one type of soil conservation method. In a complete response, explain what it is and what it's trying to prevent. Be as specific as possible. So there can be partial credit for answers on that. And also remember, it needs to be your own words. Don't copy and paste from other websites. It needs to be your own words. You can do this. All right, so I'm going to open this presentation up in a new window. Go into full screen mode. Soil conservation. So here's some background information. During the 1800s in the United States, settlers traveled west across the vast open grasslands known as the prairies. The soil was very fertile. It was rich in humus because it had tall grass. The sod was a thick mass of grass, the roots and soil. It kept the soil in place, it held on to moisture. The prairie soils are still fertile, but they started growing crops there. Corn, soybeans, and wheat, and so it has to be careful to maintain those or it won't be as fertile. So the value of soil. Why is soil so important? Dirt, they call it. It's more important than that. It's a natural resource. Anything in the environment that we use as a natural resource, it's one of the most valuable. Everything lives off the land. Humans depend directly and indirectly on the soil. You have plants directly on the soil. Humans and animals depend on plants. and other animals, on plants for food. So it's invaluable. But fertile soil is in limited supply. Less than 1/8 of the land on the earth has soils that are well suited for farming. You have cities, you have mountains, you have regions that are too dry. Soil is in limited supply when it comes to being fertile, and it takes a long time to form. It can take hundreds of years for just a few centimeters of soil to form. We've talked about that. The thick, fertile soil of the prairies took many thousands of years to develop, but we can lose it like that if we're not careful. Soil damage and loss. We have to present it. Human activities and changes in the environment can affect the soil. The value of the soil is reduced, loses fertility, and topsoil can be lost due to erosion. So when soil is exposed to water and wind, it can erode, carry it away. Plant cover can protect soil from that erosion. They break the force of rain. They hold the soil together. The roots do. Wind is another thing. Wind erosion is most likely in areas where there's been farming methods that were very dry and they didn't plan for it. Wind erosion was what caused the Dust Bowl in the Great Plains. It happened during a period in our country, and a lot of farmers were negatively impacted in a big way. Here's a little bit about the Dust Bowl. So, most of the Great Plains had been turned into farms or ranches by the 1930s, and there was a large drought, and that stirred up more dust. And they appreciated the value of the soil. People had to move away. They had to move west. The ones that did stay, they tried to save the soil. And some of the things they did were new, and some things have been around. But it was devastating. It was also during the Great Depression. Did not help at all. So let's look at some factors that contribute to soil erosion. It can be by water, by wind. Humans can mine a place, and then if they don't take care of the land, it can erode. Construction. When you see a construction site, when they have up those plastic barriers, they're sometimes like orange mesh fences. That's to help control soil from being, washed away or blown away. Overgrazing. That cow. That's not a cow, I'm sorry, that horse. If you let them stay in a field too long, overgrazing can expose the ground. I do know that's a horse, by the way. Deforestation, when you cut stuff down and you don't plant back, again, more erosion. Soil can be blown around. Poor farming practices. When that becomes dry, that stuff, the topsoil can be lost. Let's look at some examples of erosion. Gullies. Lots of water cuts through the soil, makes a deep channel. Badlands. This is an area of land that's unfit for cultivation, has little vegetation. Vegetation is misspelled right there. I'll get that corrected. Sheet erosion. When water flows as a sheet over a large area down a slope, can wash the topsoil away very quickly. Wind erosion. Blowing loose soil off a flat or sloping land. So losing topsoil isn't the only way that soil can be damaged. Soil can be damaged through the loss of fertility. So there are some crops that take certain nutrients from the soil. This happened in the South in the late 1800s. Cotton. Soil kept being used for cotton, and it was exhausting the nutrients. And then, of course, it wasn't profitable. Farmers abandoned their farms. In the early 1900s, George Washington Carver, a noted soil scientist, developed new crops and farming methods that helped to restore soil fertility in the South. Let's look at some ways that we can manage soil to prevent its destruction. Soil conservation. Here are some methods. Contour plowing. When you have a hill, you don't plow like a straight old rectangular field. You plow to the contour of the slope. It decelerates the flow of the water. Terrace farming. In places that are very mountainous, people still got to eat. And so they can, like a stair step, cutting out and making flat areas where they can farm. In the Western Himalayas, Central Himalayas, they do that also in South America. It helps to control erosion. Strip farming. When fields are divided by strips of grass and they're left so that they kind of break the force of the wind. So it's not being messy, it's to prevent wind erosion. Conservation plowing. If you drive by a field and harvest time is over and some of the roots and stuff are left over, don't think, messy, they should have just tilled that all over. No, it's something called conservation plowing. They disturb the soil and the plant cover as little as possible. Dead weeds, stalks from previous years are left in the ground. It helps to return nutrients. It retains moisture. It holds the soil in place. This is also known as low-till or no-till plowing. So multiple names for that one. Shelter belt. Having some trees near a field can prevent wind from carrying away the soil. The topsoil especially also, and so that's a shelter belt. This specifically focuses on soil fertility. It's called crop rotation. Farmers realize that they sometimes have to have a field maybe grow it in grass, and that grass can put some nutrients back into the soil. There are things called legumes. Alfalfa is a type of grass. There are other beans like soybeans. They help to put nutrients in there. So it says farmers use crops like oats and barley and rye after you've had something like corn or cotton that have taken some nutrients from the soil. So it's crop rotation. So not keeping the same type of crop in each field each year, because some actually can give things back, nutrients back to the soil. Here's an example. Peanuts helped to make the soil fertile. They're legumes, just like alfalfa, and small lumps in their roots contain nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which means they attract nitrogen from the soil and helps the plants and makes the soil more fertile again. Again, G.W. Carver, George Washington Carver, was one of the ones that taught people about that. The importance of soil conservation. So here's a video. You'll need to watch it. Since it's on YouTube, I am not allowed to show it here in our video. Otherwise, we'll get flagged for copyright. But watch that video. It's a very good demonstration.
Soil erosion. It is a fact of nature and has been around for centuries.
Part of the notes. So once again, you've got two things here. Again, be descriptive as possible. There are only two questions, but I'm expecting you to be as descriptive as possible. Now let's head on over to the next item. Farmland fantastic. So you're going to click on this to open up your document. Don't forget, you'll come back here and you'll have a submit button right here. And once you submit it, there'll be a date and time stamp over here. So you have some descriptions over here. Contour plowing, terracing, grassed waterway, forested areas, grassy area, windbreak. Some of them have different names, like for shelter belt, it's the same thing as a windbreak. Now, here's my suggestion as you do the activity. You take your letter, and you move it over here. Some of them are going to seem pretty obvious, and some you may think you know, but it's only after you look at some of the other options that you realize that maybe something else fits better. So this is an example of applying what you learned from the notes here. Now, we've got an EdPuzzle for you. This goes into some of the background of the Dust Bowl, and actually has some file footage from that time period. And then a vocabulary on noted soil scientist George Washington Carver. Remember instructions on how to take a screenshot. Most recently, we've been doing some extra credit vocabulary, but remember, extra credit has different requirements than regular vocabulary, so you must either read and respond. If you do a good score, that's fine. Submit your screenshot. If you aren't so happy with your score, you can do the quiz and submit the higher of the two scores. And lots of details can be found in these tech help tools, so please use those. So just to review for today, you've got the soil conservation notes, Farmland Fantastic, the EdPuzzle, and the vocabulary on George Washington Carver. Please reach out to me if you have questions. Thank you so much, students.